Lecture 17, How Adolescent Brains Work.
I'm going to start this lecture with something called the human barbecue stunt. It was part of a controversial MTV show, Jackass, years ago. Jackass was reality TV shows where 20-somethings did really stupid things for laughs or for attention. Problem is, lots of younger kids, particularly adolescent male younger kids, also watched this show. That had consequences, which I'll talk about in a minute. But back to the human barbecue stunt. It involved Jackass star Johnny Knoxville being roasted with steaks pinned to him, literally. He was fitted with a fireproof suit, then he was pinned head to toe with marinated steak. Knoxville lay down on a gigantic grill and began to cook, or rather the steaks. Knoxville was turned over several times, steaks sizzling. People around him laughed hysterically. Sometimes they doused the grill with lighter fluid, shooting up flames and laughing even louder. This stunt is so incredibly idiotic at so many levels, it is hard to know where to begin. But I have a place to start. Turns out the episode was popular enough to be copycatted by teenage boys from Connecticut. Only these adolescents didn't use a suit. They just doused a colleague with gasoline, set him on fire, and watched in horror as he suffered second and third degree burns. It was one of many Jackass recreations teenagers tried around the country in 2000-2001. Now, why am I bringing this up? You probably noticed I used the words adolescent and teenager quite a bit in this sad story. There's a reason. Teenagers are the subject of this lecture. Actually, their brains are the subject of this lecture. Seems like those guys from Connecticut took lots of risks, acted irrationally, paid dearly for the experience. Here's the question I want this lecture to answer. Is it typical for all teenagers to take such stupid risks? Is there anything different in their brains, different from ours, that cause them to seek such novelty? Are they just imperfect adults? The lecture is in two parts. In part one, we'll talk about solving a contradiction. In part two, we'll try to answer the question, what goes on in the teenaged brain? The practical application is advice for parents that comes straight from the mouth of one of the field's most prominent researchers. His name is Lawrence Steinberg. Along the way, I'm going to introduce you to two other researchers in the field, Robert Epstein and Jay Geed, all with contributions to the field. But we begin by attempting to address a contradiction you may have noticed. It's part one. Okay, here's the contradiction. Adolescence is a critical moment for our species' evolution. It's the first time we're capable of actually doing evolution's highest survival priority, projecting genes to the next generation. You might conclude the last thing we should be doing is taking stupid risks like human barbecues at this critical juncture. Yet risk-taking appears to be the first thing adolescents do as soon as they become old enough to make babies. We have a contradiction. Actually, it's a conundrum, a seeming contradiction. No question teenagers get a bad rap. Besides the obvious growing sexual awareness, there are a number of classic behavioral traits commonly described as the teenage brain. From legendary hormonal moodiness